listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. And last night, Michael, a big night in the New England area, not just because the Boston Celtics took a 3-0 series lead, but Tom Brady, the GOAT, officially had his number retired. The number 12 will no longer be worn by any other New England Patriot going forward. Obviously, we knew this was going to happen. He's eventually going to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but he is now a Patriots Hall of Famer officially.
Yeah, and what I really appreciated was the New England fans, how smart they were. They've seen through all the bullshit, right? They've seen through all the who wants to take credit, who's responsible, who's all this. They listen to the players. They listen to Willie McGinnis. They listen to Deion Branch. They listen to Troy Brown. And they listen to all the Randy Moss. I mean, Randy Moss's speech was incredible. But they understood that it was a team effort, that they needed a coach to lead them. They needed somebody to kind of do that. And that 3-minute standing ovation, the loudest of the evening for Belichick, to me was really, really, really great and well-deserved, too, for all the crap that he's been taking over the last 6 months about, with that dynasty infomercial that was happening and all that stuff. I'm just happy that I knew it would, because every player that has gone through there understands the different level of coaching that was going on in that building as it relates to other ones they went through. So I'm happy as shit for Tom. I really am. He deserves it. The number 12 should never be worn again. I love that. But also the fact that, you can shit on the coach as much as you want to, because that's kind of gives you credit. But people are smarter than that. Isn't this a commentary on how smart people really are compared to what you're trying to put in front of them?
Oh, 100%. And also the people in the building, like you mentioned, the McGinnis, the Randy Moss, all those, the people in the building, they know the real. They know what actually happened, despite what you might try to sell everyone else. And Brady's quote, because I want to read it because I think it just sums it up perfectly. He says, "To Coach Belichick, it wasn't me, it wasn't you, it was us. Let me make this crystal clear. There is no other coach I would rather play for." Like it's as simply put as you can put it right there. It's like
it really is. I mean, politicians should learn from this that, if you want to be politically correct, if you want to do what makes everybody happy, you're not leading, right? The essence of leadership isn't about what you do. The essence of leadership is about how you create a following, how you create people to follow you. What do you do to create that? And I think what McGinnis said about the hard work and what Moss said about holding everybody to the same standard. They talked about even after winning, it was still, there was a game they were chasing. They weren't chasing beating Cleveland in October. They were chasing winning a Super Bowl. And when you do that, you're going to make sure people adhere to it. Kansas City's doing it. Kansas City's practicing as hard as they've ever practiced. Mahomes has taken as many reps because Kansas City's chasing something more than beating Baltimore in the opening game. Like, they're chasing another title. Hats off to them. Yeah. And that's what has a hard time. I don't understand it, and I think, to me, what's going to happen in New England, and this is just my prediction, because they're going the opposite way of the program, because they want to discredit the program that won all the titles for them. They are going to be like a military academy that decided to no longer be a military academy. Like, they're no longer going to have structure and rules. Everybody's going to want to go to Dairy Queen. Everybody's going to be happy. Everybody's going to, we're going to have ride bikes in here. And they're going to come to realize that the older players, the McGinnises, the Moss, wait a minute, that's not what we stood for. That's not what we did. That's not how we became Patriots. And now you're allowing them to lax the rules. When has this ever worked? When has this ever worked? Seriously. Like, you have a standard that you have to adhere to. It's part of the brand. You call it the Patriot way. The Kraft family registered the name the Patriot way. That way won the titles. Now you're going to go another way? What are you going to call it, the Patriot relaxed way? And so for me, this is just going to be so much fun to sit back and watch. And I thought last night was a true testament to the inner feelings. And some of them we haven't heard from, like Logan Mankins, who understands all of it. The people that were traded away, that were sent away, that everybody would think would be pissed off at Belichick, they're going to stand on the table and say, wait a minute, hold on. We understand what the program was about. We represent it. It's what Walsh, it goes back to the great Bill Walsh. Marines fight for Marines, right? There was a cult within that building. You may not have liked it. It may not have been, but it worked. And it worked well. And for all the Asante Samuels who want to criticize it and make fun of it, they don't have the rings to prove it.
Yeah, and Julian Edelman said it earlier this offseason. He says, yeah, there was times that we wanted to probably MF Bill, but we understood that like this is what was required to win, and not just win, but win consistently, because that's what the Patriots were able to build there as a collection. It was a dynasty. But I want to ask you this, because since the parting of ways in, I believe it was late January, early February when it happened, we saw the Dynasty documentary. That was not well received by anybody who had been following the NFL. Like, everyone watched it and was like, "What the hell was this? This sounds like
it was
an
infomercial." Don't call it a documentary. It's an infomercial.
The PR campaign. And last night, seeing the 3-minute standing ovation so loud, Belichick could barely even speak. That's how loud it was. Do you think that Robert Kraft regrets kind of going on this sort of campaign deal that he went on this offseason?
Well, I think it's Jonathan and Robert. I think it's going to backfire on them. I think it's going to sit.
It already has backfired. It feels like.
Well, yeah, and it's going to backfire more when all of a sudden, we're not winning any games, and the attention to you just hired a coach in Mayo who has really no coaching experience. He's never really done it, and so you're counting on Jonathan. You're counting on Robin. You're counting on the people within the organization to help him. And this enormous coaching staff, of which has never been heard of before, right? I mean, they got an assistant tight end coach. Like, this is like strange to the building. I mean, and so I think the reality will set in around November, October, based on how the team is doing. And, I'm just saying to you this, from my experience of being in the league over 40 years, when you go from a structured program to making sure everybody's happy and it's more player friendly, that sounds great to the media. Everybody loves it. But when you look at the win column, it doesn't show up there. So I think that's the reality that's going to set in, because nobody gets appreciated until they're gone, right? No one gets appreciated. And everybody, it's like Pat Riley says all the time, everybody wants to take credit for the winning. Like, everybody wants to take credit for the winning. And look, Mr. Kraft owns the team. It's worth $9 billion. But I think a lot of people had a lot to do with making it worth $9 billion, because the wins make it worth $9 billion, right? It isn't because we have Patriot place here, or because, the wins make it $9 billion, or else you're the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah. Every glamour franchise across sports, it's because they won at a dominant level for a sustained period of time. That's why they got to the valuation that they got to. You mentioned the Patriot program and what it was and now what it's become. Let's talk about another program, a program that we've discussed quite a bit here on the GM
Don't
Shuffle,
use
Michael.
The word program.
Michael, hey.
Don't use the word program. It's not a program.
Well, how would you describe it? How would you describe what's going on?
A cluster, an absence of leadership. I think the Jets are the perfect. There's only 2 teams in the last 10 years that have made the playoffs: the Denver Broncos and the New York Jets. Everybody else in the league has made it. Okay, think about that. But there's not a program. You cannot say there's a program there. This is a cluster of lack of leadership. There is no leadership. There's this: we're going to trade for Aaron Rodgers because that'll help us win. We have a head coach who doesn't lead at all. I mean, this whole thing is just a microcosm of a lack of leadership. Every time they send Saleh to the podium, it just becomes worse.
Yeah.
How they don't have Frank Luntz, who serves, the PR representative, or some really good PR person to say, wait a minute, we could avoid this shit if we just are smart. But let's just stick our nose out. We've embarrassed the quarterback. We've embarrassed the franchise. I'm sure the quarterback's not happy about it. I'm sure he's pissed off. There's a way to handle stuff. And clearly, the way the Jets handle things ain't the way. I mean, the whole thing from Reddick to Bryce Huff to all of it. And then here's what cracks me up. I love it. People have been killing this. The worldwide leader, all those experts over there, they've been killing it. But then they say, well, the Jets are really still going to be a good team. Wait a minute. You can't have this dysfunction and be a good team. I'm just going to let you in on that. You can't have this lack of leadership and be a good team.
Yeah, because that's the expectation. The win total's at 9.5 at our show sponsor DraftKings. The expectation is playoffs. Aaron Rodgers even said it earlier during the OTAs. He said, if we don't perform well, we're all going to be fired. I embrace that sort of pressure. But now we see what's going on, and it doesn't feel like this is a stable situation heading into training camp. Do you think it's a big deal at all that he missed the mandatory mini camp? I almost think that the miscommunication of this whole thing with what it feels like, or the messaging is probably the bigger concern. But do you see it being a big concern that he's not there? He was there for the voluntary stuff, but the mandatory stuff.
He's been there since February. Yeah. So when he walked into Salah's office, he said, "Look, I got to go to X on this date."
Yep.
Okay, you got to go there. Then it's really important to me. Okay, I got that. All right, so we'll have mini camp here. This way, you're here. It's more a symbol. It's more of a leadership thing than it is. Oh, he's got to be there completely, right? It's more of that. Right. And there's a lack, and there's ways to have avoided it. But when you stand there and say it's an inexcused absence, it's like Reddick. Okay, look, every team's got somebody complaining about their contract, but you traded for Reddick. You bought the problem. You bought the problem. The Rodgers thing is because you can't communicate. The Reddick thing is because you can't communicate and you walked into the problem. Like, at some point, when does Woody Johnson say, wait a minute, who's leading my organization? Douglas doesn't talk to anybody. He gets away with it, and he'll get an A for a draft. He'll get an A for a draft that he doesn't take part of. He'll get 7 A's from here on in. Like, at some point, how can you call yourself the general manager when you don't lead anybody?
Yeah.
Who do you lead? You let this clown get up there and talk to the media, and he digs holes deeper for himself. Like, who's coaching Salah on how to be a head coach? That's what I'd like to know. Who's helping him? Because I'm ripping him all the time, and it's kind of unfair because he clearly doesn't know what he's doing when he gets up there. Wouldn't you think somebody would say, wait a minute, time out. Robert, we got to have, before you go up here, here's the plan. Like, who's watching the store?
Nobody.
It's nobody. That's right. That's why. Oh, but they're going to win. Don't worry. They're going to win. They're going to win. They're just going to turn it around on Sunday. Yeah, right. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, they have all that talent. But if you have all that talent and nobody's leading it, it's going to be the marching band to nowhere is what the New York Jets will be. So we'll talk more about this on the other side. Another mini camp news as well. We're just getting warmed up here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So the Rodgers absence is obviously getting a lot of the headlines, but the one that we've been sort of talking about throughout this offseason is this Hassan Reddick deal for the New York Jets. And you always mention nobody wants to trade for other people's problems unless you're the New York Jets. They traded for the Philadelphia Eagles problem and for some reason didn't think that the problem was going to be theirs. Robert Saleh did say that he has finally spoken with Hassan Reddick. Quote, he's in a really good place mentally, but he's choosing to sit this one out. I guess that's what we're going to do.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I mean,
look, all he's got to do is say, hey, look, Hassan wants a new contract. We're working through it. Joe in the front office is going to go to work through it. We knew this when we traded for him. We expected this. We were hoping he would come in and we would work on it together, but he's choosing not to be here. He'll get fined for that. And we expect him to be at training camp, period. End of story. Like, his words are so soft. And he's trying to sell. See, this is where I think he needs somebody. I mean, he's near the largest city in the world. You telling me there's not somebody who's an expert in media relations who couldn't come in and help him? Like, he needs to how to position his words to give himself some strength. But every time he speaks, he looks weak. He looks like Fredo. I'm going to start calling him fucking Fredo. Like, he looks like Fredo. Well, he's in a good place. What does that mean? He's in a good place. No, he's not in a good place. He wants more of your money. How can you be in a good place and want more coin? He's not been in a place since he was in the Eagles' place, and they traded that good place for your good place, and you got Huff and they got Riddick. Yeah. Like, you got to fix problems. That's your job. Your job is the chief figure-out officer. Figure out how to solve the problem, but don't come into this thing weak. Well, he's in a really nice place, and we had a nice conversation, and everything's fine, and we're going to get together and play golf this summer, and we'll work it out. What are we doing here? You're the leader of the team, the New York Football Jets. You have a job harder to get than the United Senator. Like, show some toughness. Like, look, we traded for him. We expect him. Look, life goes on.
Well,
He's in a good place.
Well, listen to this interaction here. This was between Saleh and a reporter. This is the reporter asking, is Hassan's contract the reason he's not here? Robert Saleh says, I don't know that. That's a conversation for him and his agent. Reporter follows up, did you know he wanted a new deal when you made the trade? Robert Saleh, that's a conversation he would have had with Joe Douglas, who's absent from all of these conversations and apparently will not be found until the introductory press conference to start training camp, and then will never be found again until draft season. That's the New York Jets.
Yeah, Joe Douglas is in witness protection. He's somewhere in West Cape May somewhere, hiding. I mean, he's got to be like, what are we doing, dude? Like, at some point, just look, I get the fact you want the coach to be the spokesman for the team. I'm 100% support you on that. But you got to show leadership. You got to show leadership to the organization, because you got too many people wondering, like, what the hell is going on here? Like, we trade for a guy that doesn't want to be here? This isn't about one guy leading us to a victory. This is about people following a leader. Remember, it's more about how to create followers than it is who's a great leader. How do you create followers? We're all working together for a bigger purpose than ourselves. Well, you're not really doing that if you can't create followers. Who's following Big Robert? He can't even, he just passes the buck. Well, I'm not in charge of that. I'm not in charge of that.
Saleh, he's sending out the SOS. He's saying, Joe, come save me. Come save me. They're asking all these questions. You're the one that has the answers, and Joe's nowhere to be found. Let's move on to a couple of wide receivers that we have here. And Amari Cooper, who's skipping Brown's mandatory minicamp. This was a little bit of a surprise entering the final year of his contract. Do you think something is able to get done with Cooper? I know they just got Jerry Jeudy in the offseason. They made that trade for him, but what do you stand on this Amari Cooper thing?
Well, here's the thing. I wrote about this today in VSiN.com. I talked about, there's this old adage that we hear about all the time, and I got my landscapers. Of course, naturally, he has to come when I'm doing a podcast.
Hey, got to keep that grass high and tight,
Yeah, got to keep it high and tight. Anyway, so people get this line that has just annoyed the shit out of me, and I've repeated it too. So it is, you need a quarterback on a rookie contract to win. Okay. Well, there's been one quarterback on a rookie contract that essentially has won a Super Bowl, and that was Mahomes. Okay. Yep. Brock Purdy's gotten there twice. He's gotten there once, but he hasn't won it.
Well, Russell Wilson won one, but that was way, that was a couple CBAs ago. This
is a longer time ago. Yeah. I'm talking about the last 10 years. I'm sorry for that. Thank you for correcting me. And so, like, that's it, right? Even Carson Wentz, the year the Eagles won it, he was on a new deal. So it's about percentage of the cap that's most important, okay? And like this year, Jalen Hurts is only taking up 6% of the Eagles' cap because of the way they structured the contract. Deshaun Watson's taking up 25% of the cap. So the next guy is Dak Prescott. He's taking up the next part of the cap. And so my point here with the story is when you take up so much of the cap in terms of percentage, it's really challenging for your team to get to where it needs to go, because you're counting on the rest of your team not having injuries, going through it. Now Cooper wants a new deal. How does that work out? They've already paid Jeudy, right? They had no draft picks. When they won, the Chiefs won last year. If you go through their team, that he had 17% of the cap, which is the highest cap hold of any quarterback going back to Steve Young that won a Super Bowl. Okay, that's the highest it's been. But they got away with it because their team was so young. They had 10 rookies make their team. 64 of their 90-some players who were on the roster were on basically minimum contracts. So they worked their way around it, is my point. It's hard to do. But Mahomes plays at such a high level. Whereas if you take the Giants, they're at 19.3 of their cap is spent for Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. Okay? Mm-hmm. Now, Jones, so we get this straight, he eats up 18.8 of the cap. He's 6-21 against teams that went on to make the playoffs. He's 0-11 against teams that have won 12 or more games. And he's the only quarterback in the history of the NFL to have a contract in excess of $100 million and never have a season of throwing over 3,500 yards or 25 touchdowns. So that's you're basically what you're saying is he takes too much of the cap. And same thing with Watson. Same thing with Prescott. They're taking way too much of the cap to make your team better. And so, like, for Cooper, Watson has him trapped. Yeah. He's eating too much of the pie. Whereas, okay, this year, Burrow, he's at 12% of the cap. Josh Allen, 11.8. Even Tua, if he gets a new contract, Tua is already the 11th ranked quarterback overall in cap percentage. He's at 11.1 because of his option year. I'm sure they'll lower that down to where it is. So I think we get so caught up and you got to be on a rookie contract. No, you have to have the contract so that the percentage doesn't eat away the whole team. That's why it makes it hard on things like Cooper.
Yeah, it's like Cooper comes to the trough and says, "Where's the food?" And it's like, well, ask your buddy Deshaun. He took it all.
Yeah, he's eating it all.
He's eating all the food.
It's like they said in The Sopranos. You can't eat all the rigatoni. Like, you got to share it, you know? And so, like, and I'm not saying see, to me, there's two things here. There's the average per year. Burrow's the highest paid quarterback in the league, but right now he only counts for 12% of their contracts. Okay. Mm-hmm. So same thing with Lamar. He's only at 12%. So you can function around that. But when you're at like 25%, like Deshaun Watson is, how the hell do you build a team? Or 23% like Dak Prescott is? They have no room.
Yeah.
And if you're the Giants, you're at almost 20% with Daniel Jones, who can't win.
Isn't this sort of like a commentary on, if you like your quarterback, you should probably extend them as early as possible? Because all those instances that you brought up, Deshaun Watson was a sign and trade deal coming over from Houston. Dak Prescott was on the tag, and Dallas really wanted to sign him. They didn't want to go through the tag for the 2 straight years. Daniel Jones was almost a tag candidate. The Giants signed him at the 11th hour. It feels like all of these teams that gave these guys 20-25% were super up against it because they had sort of delayed the process, or maybe were a little skittish about it until it came down to kind of nut cutting time.
Right. Like, if the Giants just would have franchised Daniel Jones after the good year he had, they would be away from the cap. They wouldn't have paid him because he's coming off an injury. They could have re-signed him and got a cheap deal. It's the same thing with Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, they redo his deal. Kyler Murray accounts for almost 19% of the cap. I mean, he's the fifth highest cap percentage of any quarterback. Him and Desmond Ridder can count for 18.9% of the cap. So, like, they didn't have to do that deal. Whereas the Eagles did a deal they did a really smart deal. The Eagles were smart about it. They went ahead and did Hurts's deal. He's at 6.8% of the cap this year. Now, he's going to go up, but they can continue to sign their guys. It's not the rookie deal. It's the percentage of how much money you're giving them over the years of the contract. That's the average per year. That's like, okay, what's his face? Goff just got a new deal. He just got a brand new deal, right? Mm-hmm. He's 11% of the cap. 11.74%. Now, they've got this year, and I'm sure next year, and then it'll go up. It'll go up, but the cap's going to go up, but the percentage is the key. So that gives you room to kind of rebuild your team around it. This rookie notion is like, tell me what rookie quarterback's going to come in the league and be ready to win a Super Bowl. I mean, Mahomes did it, but there's very few and far between.
Yeah, Mahomes is the exception to the rule. I think like that's not like what the norm is, and we see that as he's an all-time great player. It's because I agree with you, because I think it does get a little lazy of like, oh, you just need the guy on the reset the clock. We heard that the big thing for the Chicago Bears this year is that, hey, trade Fields, reset the clock, draft Caleb Williams, which was the smart thing to do. But it's just because you get the rookie contract doesn't mean, all right, now here we go to the Super Bowl, because I feel like a lot of people think that that's what the case is.
Right, but the market, like what Tua said, and this is what I wrote about, the market is the market. You're not getting away with not paying them. If you want to buy a house in that neighborhood, you're going to pay money for the quarterback. Now, you don't have, but how you allocate that money and how it's percentage on the cap, that's up to being smart with the contracts. You know, whereas, can you imagine the Eagles are allocated 6.7% of their cap to Hurts? Meanwhile, the Giants are at 18.
Yeah, Cowboys at 20 something. It's like,
the Cowboys are because the Cowboys keep trying to redo the deal, and the numbers keep going up. They guarantee the salary.
Yeah, and now he has a no tag clause and a no trade clause. that should go well for negotiations, I'm sure, for the Dallas Cowboys. All right, on the other side, we'll have a quick little conversation on the other side. Sean Payton had interesting comments to say about some of the critics of the Denver Broncos in year 2 of his regime, and also wanted to pay tribute to the late, great Jerry West, who passed away early this week in the National Basketball Association. We'll be back for the DK Network. We'll see you guys later, but for our podcast audience, stick with us here. This is the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we're keeping things rolling here on the GM Shuffle. While we were in the break, we had some breaking news from Tom Pelissero over at NFL Network. The NFL is docking the Atlanta Falcons a 2025 fifth-round pick for violating the league's anti-tampering policy with Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Charlie Warner. The team is also being fined $250,000, and Super Bowl winning general manager Terry Fontenot is being fined $50,000. The violations are considered logistical/administrative, such as making travel arrangements after players agreed to terms and did not involve contact prior to the negotiating window, per sources, is what Pelissero tweets. Michael, your thoughts to that? The Falcons, $250K and a fifth-round pick, they'll be docked next year.
You know, it is beautiful. It's just absolutely, it pays to have friends in high places. And obviously, Kaiser Sose McKay, who's wired into the league, you know, it pays to have him. And you could see why he's the executor of the will for Arthur Blank. Because it's like this. Wait a minute. You got fined $1 million and taking a first-round draft pick away for not deflating footballs. But we thought you deflated footballs. But we thought you did. Meanwhile, you're only going to get fined a fifth-round pick for travel arrangements. Like, isn't tampering either you are or you're not? It's kind of like being pregnant. Either you are or you're not. Either you tampered or you didn't, right? I mean, like I don't understand it. I'm not that smart. I get it. You know, I'm just a fat guy looking for the next donut. But I mean, like, seriously, like, how did they get away with this? How did they get away with this? Like a fifth-round pick? I mean, Schefter was reporting earlier, like he was told it was going to, you expect a big thing. Oh, they get a fifth. I mean, they pumped music into the stadium and got slapped on the wrist. Like, This is the benefits of having somebody in high places. Like, this is like, you feel now that, you know, the justice, that when you go against a high-priced attorney and you lose, you realize, okay, that's the system. Well, you got Kaiser Sose McKay, you know, and okay, Fontenot takes one on the chin for $50K. All right, good. We'll see with that. I mean, to me, it's comical. Either they didn't or they didn't.
Yeah.
Am I misreading that,
No,
Femi?
I find it weird.
Either you tampered or you didn't tamper.
Exactly. Like, my thing is that if they didn't find anything, they should have been fined nothing, and there should never have been a first round or a fifth round pick taken from them. It's like you mentioned, it's one or the other. They didn't, or they did it, or they didn't do it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense what the NFL doing. But hey, like you mentioned, Rich McKay he's got friends in high places and more importantly, the right places, because the Atlanta Falcons, a slap on the wrist, one might say, this thing with the tampering with Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, and Charlie Warner. On the flip side of it, the Philadelphia Eagles, they were not fined. They did not have a pick taken away, because Pelissero also reported this, that after thorough review of the Philadelphia Eagles signing of Saquon Barkley, the NFL today informed the club that the investigation did not discover sufficient evidence to support a finding that the anti-tampering policy was violated. And coming to this conclusion, the league reviewed phone logs, text messages, and other documents related to the Philadelphia's free agency strategy and decision to sign Barkley. The NFL also interviewed several members of the organization, including Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, as well as Barkley and Penn State head coach James Franklin. As with every review, should new evidence be uncovered, the league may reopen the investigation. So right now it seems like case closed, but if something were to pop up, who knows what happens. But I don't think anything would pop up. But as we've said, Barkley was not the issue. I feel like it was Hassan Reddick, who we talked about on the GM Shuffle podcast, a week or 10 days prior to free agency, saying that, hey, there's a good chance that this is going to happen with the Eagles.
Well, no, Bryce Huff, you mean. I mean,
yeah,
Reddick's
Bryce
on
Huff,
your brain,
yeah.
but it was
Yeah,
Bryce Huff. We thought he was, I mean, there was no question he was going to Philly. Look, I have no, to me, the Philly thing is insignificant. Like we know that Philly was probably being very aggressive, just like every other team's aggressive. Just like, Chicago signed Swift right out of the gate, immediately. Did they tamper? I don't know. It's kind of part of the landscape. But you don't do a deal with a quarterback at this level without having some infrastructure or knowing that you can jump into it. Like, you got to know quarterbacks they don't move randomly. Okay, no. Gardner Minshew knew he was going to be a free agent. He understood that. He's moved around. Baker Mayfield, the same thing when he signed with Tampa. Those are second level. But when you're an elite quarterback or a quarterback who's produced numbers, you want to know about the offense. You want to know about the defense. Like, look, if you're in Atlanta and you were Super Bowl winning GM Terry Fontenot, you would say, look, let's just wait 2 days before we announce this. Let's just make sure everybody understands that this process of knowing what the offense is going to be, knowing who's going to call plays, knowing who's going to do this, knowing who's going to do that, knowing where we're going here. Now, I know they had the tampering period before where you could have these conversations, but it takes more than just that, right?
Yep.
And then to get fined a fifth-round pick when they say you were, but it was travel. It's just like, what does that mean? It's like the Warren Commission saying, well, Oswald went down from the 6th floor to the second floor and bought himself a Coke, but he wasn't out of breath. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, it means nothing. It means you're just trying to cover up shit.
Yeah, well, they got the Teflon Don in Rich McKay, so this is the punishment for the Atlanta Falcons, and there's
it pays to have friends in high places. Look, I'm jealous. I'll be the first guy to admit it. I'm jealous. I mean, I think what it shows you for all the people that want to get in the NFL, you're better off if your connections are more important than your knowledge. If you have the right connections, you can go a long, long, long way. You don't have to win. You don't have to do anything. Rich McKay's 169-70.
But he's got the ear of Arthur Blank, and he's got the ear of people in NFL offices as well for the Atlanta Falcons. So beneficial for them. Congrats, and hang the banner if you so choose. So let's talk about Sean Payton, because we teased this as we were wrapping up here in the break. Sean Payton was asked about it by the media about, hey, like, I believe it was Pro Football Focus rated them as the worst roster in the NFL. There was several publications saying that the Denver Broncos are in a really tough spot. Well, here's what Sean Payton had to say when he spoke with Denver media earlier this week.
I have 2 middle fingers. I've gotten better with age not using them. And I think it's more... and I would say this has changed for me. It's more inward focused relative to our own team and what we're doing relative to, as you get older in this, you don't waste the calories on certain things that I might have, back in 06, 7, 8.
He says he's not paying attention to all the outside noise and all that stuff. And I think one thing he said afterwards, he said the NFL train is always on the track. Someone's always driving it, but nobody knows who's driving it. And so we don't know who's following and following all this information. It was an interesting comment that he made, and I'm sure he's going to defend his team and feel good about his team. And it doesn't matter what people say outside. It matters how they actually play.
But nobody really knows his team.
Yeah.
I love this. People say the guy needs to work on his footwork, but they don't tell you what's wrong with his footwork. I watch golf. We'll watch the U.S. Open this weekend, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't tell you what's wrong with somebody's swing. I have no idea. I can tell you it's a bad shot. I can't tell you if his putter's not aligned. I'm not an expert. I have experience watching golf, just like a lot of people have experience watching football, but they're not experts in football. And so when someone says, well, he needs to work on his footwork, the next question should be, what's wrong with his footwork? Let them explain to you. Teach me what's wrong. Tell me what's wrong. Of course they can't do that. They just repeat what they've heard from somebody else. There's no knowledge being gained from it. Bo Nix could tie his arm to his feet. Whatever you think of him, right? Whatever you don't, you may not like him. But Sean sees something in him that fits his offense perfectly. And he's the son of a coach. He's going to work hard. He's going to be humble. He's going to be able to relate to his teammates, which is different than Zach Wilson, who wasn't going to work hard, couldn't relate to his teammates, and really couldn't take that amateur status and turn into professional. That's a fact, right? I've said this many times. 5 years from now, the worldwide leader will do a documentary on Zach on how I don't want to play. Now, what Zach's going to do, and we're going to find out if he loves football or not, is in Denver, he's going to learn either he wants to be a professional or it's just not for him, because Peyton's going to make him do that. So, I get what Sean should just stop acknowledging it. Trust your instincts. Trust what you know. And who cares? It's like J.J. Watt when he came out and attacked Pro Football Focus. We all know people that are in the league laugh at the grades in Pro Football Focus. They laugh at them. They don't pay attention to them. They pay attention to them. Remember when Tyreek Hill was the 9th-ranked receiver in the league? Do you remember that?
It's just unbelievable.
Do you remember that, right?
Yeah, I remember. It's a fact.
You know, and so, like, who cares? Like, everybody has an opinion. And just because it's Pro Football Focus doesn't make it right. My opinion's wrong. I've been 1,000 times wrong, right? We're all wrong on things. So, like, you know your team. I think his team's going to be better than 5.5 wins. I think there's no question. But to me, you know, who's judging you? Grade the judgers.
USA Today also said that he was the 16th best coach in the National Football League.
Who's grading the coaches? I don't
know how they're grading.
I want to know who's USA Today's top 10 coaches.
I'm going to Google it right now.
They don't even know who coaches. Like, okay, if you say, let's just take Matt LaFleur, and I don't mean to pick on him, but he's the head coach of the Packers.
Yes.
But he's not really the head coach of the Packers. He runs the offense. I mean, there's other coaches there that pick up the slack for Matt. Like, he's not the Bill Parcells head coach of the Packers or the Vince Lombardi. He's not running the whole team. So what did you even know what is the criteria for being the best? Like, Andy Reid runs the team. They work hard, they practice hard. Kyle Shanahan runs everything in San Francisco. He's a head coach. They're head coaches. You think Mike McDaniels has spent 1 minute in the defensive meeting room? Come on.
I found the list. The list is number 1, Andy Reid. Number 2, Sean McVay. Number 3, Mike Tomlin. Number 4, Kyle Shanahan. Number 5, Matt LaFleur. Number 6, John Harbaugh. Number 7, Zach Taylor.
How can LaFleur be ahead of Harbaugh? How can that happen? I mean, how can that happen?
Number 8, Dan Campbell.
Can we? I'm going to have to call Big Daddy and get him on this. John Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl. His team has been highly competitive. He runs and manages the game. He coaches all three. I mean, he's involved in all 3 phases. And LaFleur, I mean, come on. I mean, this is like what I'm talking about. People that don't know are grading. That's why Sean should just ignore it.
Number 10 is McDermott. Number 11, Stefanski. 12, Steichen. 13, Kevin O'Connell. 14, Jim Harbaugh. 15, Mike McDaniel. And then 16, Sean Payton.
Jim Harbaugh's got a 70% winning percentage in the NFL, but he's 15th. Makes sense.
I'm scrolling for my guy. Where's McCarthy at? Didn't he win a Super Bowl somewhere? We're in the 20s.
And he's got Hall of Fame credentials, and Dak Prescott had his best year, but we all hate Mike.
22.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's a joke.
22, Mike McCarthy for the Dallas Cowboys. That does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. We'll see you guys later on. Subscribe, rate, and review as always.